The abomination of desolation is, in its incarnate form, the state. The unforgivable sin is incoherency, or in its extreme form, insanity. The ultimate evil is parasitism, as this encompasses the impact that all evil has on the body politic. The state is the devil incarnate and the encapsulation of the father of lies. It is in the guise of the state that the devil works his mischief on the world. It is the state that runs cover for Satan. However, to understand this we need to take one step back to the very structure of existence, which is bifurcated. This is the difficult part to digest, which is made more palatable by modern physics, which acknowledges the existence of matter and antimatter. These two forces ostensibly occupy the same reality yet are incompatible and mutually destructive. There is a plus and minus reality. There is the reality God spoke into existence, which for all intents and purposes we can label metaphysical. It's a misnomer, as it is only metaphysical if you think the natural world is the real and cognizant one. But when we look at reality, all we have to experience reality is our definitions, our information. We have conceptions of things. But the thing is only as detailed and as vivid as our ability to define and name it. If we had no name for snow and no conception of it, it would not exist. If we had an image of what it looks like by no experience of it, our snow would not be the same as the snow of someone whose reality was made up primarily of an environment composed of snow, as is the case with the Inuit. Many people take the information and turn it into something real in a physical sense. They think what they see has substance. The more sophisticated think that what they see is really an illusion, but there is something with substance that gives rise to the illusion, or sensory impressions. But what is a mental impression? How can a physical brain acquire an impression of a physical substance that is external to the brain? There is no way electrical impulses caused by sensory cells to be translated into a visual impression of the world, without a grammar, or a way to translate these signals. But to translate them correctly, there has to be an external means of calibrating the process, so as to ensure it does this accurately. How do we know we all see colors the same way? The point is, the physical view of reality is incoherent. It cannot be substantiated, and it makes no sense logically or morally. Those who think there is only one reality assume this reality is physically real. We need to go through this to get to the definition of what the abomination of desolation is, because it is intrinsic to the physical view of reality. If reality is physical, there is only one reality. Those who claim reality is physical are right to conclude anything other than that which has physical substance is inadmissible. Thus the widespread rejection of all metaphysical statements by those who used to be known as logical positivists. What discredited the logical positivists was the demonstration that their claims were incoherent, being themselves metaphysical in nature. Logically, we cannot use metaphysical statements to demonstrate metaphysical statements have no meaning. Therein is the crux of the issue. Technically, a true logical positivist who rejects all metaphysical propositions and everything relying on the God hypothesis has recourse only to brute force. In more refined circles this is called causality, but it comes down to the fact that every effect must have a cause and nothing without a cause can have an effect. In simpler language, if it was not caused to exist it cannot come about nor cause anything else to exist. Therefore, ultimately language is not really permitted in an apostate system. Language cannot be caused because meaning cannot be caused. The only way to get information is to have a sender, a receiver, and a symbolic language with an agreed-upon grammar, or instructions for coding and decoding the symbols. This cannot be caused because it requires agreement, and agreements are only achieved by sentient beings. Still, regardless of logic or anything else, humans are sentient beings and cannot function totally at the level of causality. So, human use law as an alternative or substitute for direct force. But the law is just the opinion of men who have the capacity to enforce their decisions onto others. The law is a throwback to natural law or the law of the jungle. In nature might makes right and the end justifies the means. This is the law of the jungle and of those who live in primitive societies. There is a difference between advanced and primitive cultures. Primitive cultures live by the law of the jungle and advanced cultures have learned how to live according to the golden rule. Do unto others as one would have others do unto you is not just a responsive doctrine. It is a testament against evil, against parasitism, against making claims against that which one has no author rights to. If one did not create it, one has no claim against it. If we acted thus, we would respect the ownership rights of others, as if we denied the right of everyone else to what they create, nothing would be sacred, and it would be utter chaos. But this is what the devil seeks to undermine, but surreptitiously, because he cannot come out and say it. Yet, he has to undermine this position to make good his claim to the throne of God, at least over the earth. There is some method to his madness, however, which we need to understand. Understanding this helps us understand the role of idols in his panoply. We understand man has no power of us own. We can add value to the things of God, but we cannot create anything ex nihilo. We have some physical power, but that is very limited in the grand scheme of things. In fact, all of our power really comes from God, as it is power over ideas. However, we corrupt our ideas to make them agents of evil rather than as implements of God. To take an extreme example, think of the divine right of kings. This is not a real thing, it is an idea conveyed by words. These words have meaning and they express an idea, they convey information, but the information is not intrinsic to the words but a product of our reality. For example, some will find the phrase religiously significant, and others will find them preposterous if not totally meaningless, depending on whether you think there is such a thing as a king and that he has a right given by God to his throne. If you consider this to be a truth and you have the power, it becomes an idol, a law that is enforceable. An idol is a key idea or justification for a set of regulations. Idols warrant law. The idol gives authority to the law as God gave his commandments to the Jews' authority. The idol, viz. The idol creator, finds a victim or a cause centered on a victim, which is something that the creator of the idol sees as amiss. Slavery has become an idol for many on the left and the justifier for much law and extrajudicial activity. In a broader sense, the plight of blacks in a white world has been turned into an existential crisis, the solution to which is ultimately the demise of whites and the entirety of their culture. Minorities as a whole have become idolized, that is, repurposed as an idol. The idol is in many ways what used to be the purpose of man or an ideal that was closer to a first-order principle. Idols, on the other hand, are closer to being a lever by which power and property can be leveraged away from society and into the hands of an elite. It must be understood that as complicated as the concept of the idol is, it all comes down to unseating God, which means, in this context, taking control of earth. Parasitism takes from people what is rightfully theirs, but this includes God. Ultimately parasites what belongs to God. Taking property gives the property owner power over people. People are powerless without property. And so we can think of idols as a mechanism used by the devil and his minions to wrest earth from God by means of depriving people of their property rights. So let's revisit the concept of the idol from this perspective of taking property away from whom it rightfully belongs. Remember, people have little or no power, so the devil, through the agency of his followers, must find a way to amass sufficient power to expropriate property. This agency is the state. But for this to work, the state must be formed, and for this to happen, the devil needs to justify the existence of the state to its potential subjects. The key to this was what is called a protection racket. The powers that be threaten the weak and then promise to remove the threat upon payment of a portion of the wealth they have or will create. This was sufficient to create the nobility and medieval armies. But the ability of a feudal system to translate into a globalist empire was limited. The feudal system structured society into serfs, peasants, and nobility. In this hierarchical system, land was owned by the nobility and worked by peasants or serfs, who in return provided labor, services, or a portion of their produce to the landowners. The nobility, in turn, owed allegiance and military service to higher-ranking lords or the monarch. Feudalism was the dominant social and political order in much of medieval Europe. This became glaringly apparent during the Industrial Revolution, and so democracy was instituted, which brought more and more of the wealth creators into the power structure. But it was a highly unequal level of participation. The key feature of a democracy is that the lower echelons vote their power away, transferring it as a form of power of attorney, into the hands of a representative, who then holds all the power, even the power to expropriate the wealth of the voter and give it to the authorities at the center of the nation. Democracy is itself something of an idol, being idolized in order to give it greater credibility, but it cannot be considered anything less than a Trojan horse. One votes, ostensibly as an act of authority, but it is the first and only act of sovereignty one engages in, because once the election is over, the state exercises full and often absolute power. What power it does not have it has abrogated with the full knowledge it can reclaim this power at any time. All real power in the apostate system is contained in the military. Those who control the military control the property and through this, the people. The state, however, knows the military option is problematical, thus it first of all relies on democracy. But the people will not transfer their power and subsequently, their property, over to a state that offers no incentives. This is where the idolatry comes in. For example, the state will recognize that racism is a trigger issue. It will therefore create an objective or desirable end called equality. This is an idol because it is a pivotal point. In the pursuit of equality, the state is enabled to mobilize the public and requisition resources. The people worship at the feet of this idol and pray for it to end their suffering and bless them with equality. The state acts as the priests of the idol and makes the sacrifices, composed of all of the things the people must give up, in order to receive equality. This is all regulated by the law. Thus, the law is the unforgivable sin, for the law is the validation of idols and the rites of the religion. The law, however, never makes sense, and so contributes to the level of incoherency. The law is never truly able to accomplish anything, for it is the source of the evil that is in the world. The state has nothing. Regardless of what it promises, it must remove something from others to provide what it promises to a third party. To eliminate racism and inequality, the state must first expropriate wealth from the people. This creates power disparities and inequality. Every time the state imposes its programs on the populace, it creates other problems which then justify the creation of additional programs. The abomination of desolation is the legal or justice system itself. The justice system legitimizes the law and validates the role of the lawgiver. That is, the justice system gives power and authority to the parasites. The unforgivable sin is to create incoherency. This is also considered the creation of idols. The incoherent cannot be saved as they have lost the sentience required to understand their sin. They cannot repent. But the problem is, the justice system blocks the path to repentance.